All right. Um, well, thanks for taking time, Jameson.
Yeah, sure
Uh,
thing.
do you want to just start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, Hi, everyone. I'm Jameson Dempsey. I'm one of the global directors of Legal Hackers, which is the largest grassroots legal innovation movement in the world. I'm also a residential fellow at Codex, which is Stanford Law School's Center for Legal Informatics.
Awesome. And maybe can you tell us a little bit more about Legal Hackers? Where did it start? How did it get started? What's its history?
Sure. So Legal Hackers started in 2012. It was started at Brooklyn Law School in Brooklyn, New York, specifically within a clinic called the Brooklyn Law Incubator and Policy Clinic, which is one of the earliest clinics that provides pro bono legal support for early stage technology startups. So it's run by this guy, Jonathan Askin. Jonathan Askin was a technology policy attorney, spent a number of years in Washington, D.C., but saw a gap in the marketplace. He saw that lawyers weren't being trained to teach, or lawyers weren't being trained to deal with the next wave of technology innovation, of dealing with startups. And so he wanted to provide an opportunity for students to get engaged really early. And so that's what the Blip Clinic is. In 2012, or 2011 over into 2012, there was a big technology policy battle called SOPA and PIPA that dealt with intellectual property down in Washington, D.C. And a number of technology companies, from startups to large companies, big NGOs, nonprofits, were mobilizing in opposition to this law. And so Jonathan and his students said, well, how can we get involved? And Jonathan, in his work and along with the students, had gone to hackathons and saw how they worked and said, well, maybe we can host a legal hackathon. But the question was, what is a legal hackathon? My understanding is this was the first one. There hadn't been one before, so they were kind of inventing it as they went along. So what they did was they brought together stakeholders from policy, from law, from the technology community, brought some folks up from Washington, D.C., and held this first legal hackathon. It was about hacking the act. How can we improve copyright policy using the methods and the tactics of hacker culture, of the technology community? And it was a big success. So they wanted to continue on with the momentum. These were students who were graduating from school in a really tough job market, looking for ways to connect to potential employers, to the technology community at large, to startups. And so they started a meetup called New York Legal Hackers. And that's really all that they planned to do at the time, was bring together their friends, their, like I said, potential employers, people with a common mindset. And it took off really quickly. They grew to 500 members, 1,000 members, I think, within the first year.
Wow.
And so it was a really, really great reception, but it was never meant to be anything other than something for the New York City technology community. My role in this is I was a member of the clinic. I graduated the year before. I was, I'd say, a founding member, but not a founder. That goes to a really amazing team: Phil Weiss, Warren Allen, Tarek Badat, Lauren Mack, John Randall, all these other folks who came together and worked, Farah Zaman, who were doing this amazing work of bringing it all together. But at this stage, I was a clerk in a court in Brooklyn. But I was engaged early on and then took a job down in Washington, D.C. Now, when I got to Washington, D.C., I saw that there was a similar community down there, these latent, siloed groups, right? So you had the technology policy, legal technology, all these different people at the intersection of law and tech, but who weren't talking to one another. And so another New York legal hacker, Rebecca Williams, who just moved down, and I got together and said, well, maybe there could be a second chapter of legal hackers. Maybe this can be something that could have something of a chapter feel, a national feel, who knows? But we were drawing from similar communities that we'd seen. Folks like Code for America, for example. The Code for America Brigade community is really, really active in civic technology and doing amazing work. We looked at things like the Internet Society, groups like Sandbox, Fabian, obviously, that had a distributed quality to them, but were all bound by a common mission or ethic. And so we started DC Legal Hackers with that idea of taking the ethic, the method of New York Legal Hackers, bringing it down to DC. Well, slowly but surely, we started to grow as well. Then one of our members moved to Los Angeles, started a third chapter. Now, I should say, legal technology and legal technology communities have existed for a long time. Tech policy communities have existed for a long time. There are bar associations. Lawyers are used to getting together. But there hadn't been very much in terms of open culture in the legal industry. So the same things that motivated Creative Commons, for example, or OpenStreetMaps, hadn't really existed in the legal community. And so that's the gap that we were filling by bringing all of these people together. But what we found was that slowly but surely this thing grew. And so first we spread around the United States, then a chapter in Europe, a chapter in South America, and then increasing interest over time. And so now where we stand is we have over 110 chapters around the world in every continent except for Antarctica. And I tell everyone I'm working very hard on our first Antarctic chapter, but we're not quite there yet. But what binds us all is this common mission, this common ethic of fostering creative problem solving, of adopting the hacker ethic of the 50s and 60s at MIT to law and policy and the legal profession.
Wow. Okay. Amazing. And what's you mentioned originally it started with this hackathon. Is that still the core of the experience, kind of that legal hackathon, or what happens in Legal Hackers?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the short answer is no. The core is not the hackathon. A Legal Hackers chapter might have one hackathon or two hackathons as large public events that bring different stakeholders together, bring new folks into the fold. It's an opportunity for sponsors. And a sponsor to me is just a member of the community who's contributing money and time and their resources to the event. But it's an opportunity for them to get involved, to put on a big event for the whole community. But that's really not the core of the experience. The core of the experience is bringing these people together from law, technology, the academy, design, through regular public gatherings. So these are free public events. Sometimes there's a topics where people will talk about, once again, copyright policy or the future of the legal profession or artificial intelligence in the law or blockchain policy or something along those lines. Sometimes it's just to hang out. But really the idea is we want to bring these people, these multidisciplinary people who share this common set of values together in person so they can meet each other, put names to faces, screen names to faces, that sort of stuff. And become friends with one another, honestly, and colleagues, friends, because they come from the same place, they're driven by the same stuff, and they have the same thing at the core.
Yeah. And you mentioned, I think you used the word that these events are public events. What do you mean by that? That they're open to anyone else, even if they're not legal hackers? Or what do you mean by public events?
Yeah, so a legal hacker is just someone who shares the values of legal hackers. And so we don't have a tight membership role. We're non-commercial, which means nobody makes money in legal hackers or off legal hackers. We're not a trade association or a membership group, so nobody pays dues to be a part of it. We don't give out cards or something like that, or you're not a card carrying legal hacker or something.
You have no secret handshake?
No secret. Maybe we should work on that. But no secret handshake. So people just flow in and out. And in the legal profession, we're used to these walled gardens. We're used to the guild model. We're used to things costing a bunch of money to participate. Everything from continuing legal education to the legal system as a whole. It costs a lot of money to engage with the legal system, which is an unfortunate fact of the way that the system today works. So we want to flip that over. We want legal hackers to be this free resource, free opportunity for people to come in, to flow in and out. If you're interested in learning more, you could show up to an event that interests you, but then maybe you don't come back. If you want to be part of the community, you can come to every single event. And if you want to have more of a role, you could serve as an organizer in a community or start your own.
Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. Are there any downsides to running them all in such an open, free, inclusive way? Is there, I can see the pros of like it just being so accessible and being kind of welcoming. I can see the pros, I guess, in terms of diversity, for example. Are there downsides of being so open?
So I think it's a great question. And Catherine Marr, who's the executive director of the Wikimedia Foundation, they deal with a similar open community, gave a great talk on this that I would commend.
And in that case, the community is the people who contribute to Wikipedia.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned the positives, and the positives are really at the core of who we are. We are open, welcoming, inclusive, diverse. Our organizing teams have diversity of gender, race, professional background. We want the organizing team to reflect the diversity of the entire community. So really, this is at the core of who we are. The challenge, though, that you face is one of potential for co-optation. I can't tell you the number of people who've approached me and said, wow, you could probably make a lot of money on legal hackers, right? Or legal hackers could be a great vehicle for my pet project, my company, my advocacy platform, a political party, right? Any number of these things. And that's the risk of co-optation. Is anyone can flow in, people can opt in as organizers. And there's the risk that someone will take it and use it for nefarious ends, for personal benefit, pecuniary benefit, these sorts of things. And that's a risk with any open community. And that's why it's so important for us to have this really grounded, concrete ethos, but then also rules of the road. Legal Hackers is extremely decentralized, but we have a protocol. We have the things that we all agree on about what this is, why it exists, where it exists in the legal innovation stack. And I think together those things enable us to prevent those risks of co-optation. Or perpetuating the things about the legal system that many members of Legal Hackers think need to change, which is things like exclusivity, right? Yeah. For example. And so I mentioned a few of the things that we set as the ground rules. We're non-commercial. Nobody makes money off of it. We're not a trade association. This is not a collection of startups. You don't need to be a lawyer to participate. It's open to anybody. And similarly, we're not a political organization. We don't take positions on policy issues. We're neutral as to policy, to party, all of these sorts of things. And by setting those ground rules, our hope is to insulate ourselves against potential risks, right? The ones that could end up undermining an open community, or at least the open values of the community.
Yeah, beautiful. And you mentioned before that you guys are a fully decentralized organization in terms of how your governance structure works. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, how does governance work, and how are you guys organized in this regard?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're extremely decentralized, which means that the chapters opt in to forming the chapter. The chapters determine who their organizers are. The chapters determine how decision-making works within the chapter. They determine what events they host. They determine their partners. Once again, all within these guardrails, right? Nothing commercial, no advocacy, not a trade association, right? But the individual chapters determine the way that they function, more or less. And that's really important for us because, first of all, as someone living right now in Silicon Valley, but formerly in New York or in Washington, D.C., it's not my place to dictate, for a local community somewhere else in the world about what they should be talking about, who should be a part of the organization, those sorts of things. That's up to them, and that's key to our open culture, our open values as well. It's also really important for the chapters to determine and lift up the voices within their local community. That's the one thing that I found in talking to these organizers and talking to chapter members around the world, is that every city has a valuable community in it of people who are really passionate, who want to get engaged. And this can be Legal Hackers can be a forum to raise up those voices, to celebrate the projects that they're working on, to talk about issues from the local perspective. What does Internet of Things policy or cybersecurity policy mean to my local community, or blockchain governance, right? These sorts of things. What does it mean to my local community? And it's critical for us, and I think critical for the organization and any open community, to look to the local chapters and to inspire them to do things by and for their local community in order to ensure that the global community can thrive. Because the global community only thrives when local communities are doing great things. So that's really at the local level. At the global level, I think that there are two key aspects to it. One is Legal Hackers LLC. So Legal Hackers LLC was created for New York legal hackers to run their local events, to take in small sponsorships. There's essentially no staff. We have our directors, but we run as lightweight as humanly possible. We're not a big NGO, or we don't take in big foundation money right now. We run extremely leanly. And I think that's also been really critical to our success, because we've been able to have our normal day jobs, but also work on this, what we believe is a very important global effort. As Legal Hackers LLC, or as the central organization, to the extent there is a central organization, our goal is to synthesize what's going on around the world. What are opportunities? So, for example, if a legal hacker in Bogota moves to Mexico City, what's the best way to ensure that that organizer can get in touch with the Mexico City legal hackers chapter organizers so they can share knowledge, meet together for coffee or a glass of wine, and share experiences, right? So how can we facilitate those connections? How can we ensure consistency while also enabling experimentation among chapters? So we have a chapter handbook. We have a template chapter plan that new chapters can use. We have best practices that we've seen, and then we also have a collaborative membership mark, the trademark for our logo. Once again, that enables us to ensure a common identity, and that everyone who's involved in the community, once again, open, welcoming, collaborative, is operating within our shared values. And so that's really the role of the central organization. We put on an annual summit where we bring together the organizers,
which was recently.
Yeah, which was in August in Brooklyn. And then now what we're trying to do is, because it's really expensive for folks, especially folks who are earlier in their career or have childcare responsibilities or other family or professional responsibilities in their local city, we're starting to do more regional events. And so we had our first regional summit in Odessa, Ukraine a couple months ago. We have another one coming up in Singapore in November, in Bogota in February, and then in Madrid in June. But these are for the local regions to come together. So it's easier for folks to get there, to connect with one another, and to share regional values, share regional initiatives, and other things like that. And as Legal Hackers LLC, we help to facilitate some of those, make sure that folks feel like they have the resources. But then again, it's also organized by the local chapter that's doing it. And I guess the third component of it, which keys into what I was just saying before, is this trans-chapter operation, inter-chapter efforts. And so as far as the inter-chapter efforts are concerned, we want to make sure that chapter organizers get to know one another, that they feel comfortable reaching out in a decentralized manner, in a peer-to-peer manner, or they say, hey, I'm working on this cool initiative. Do you think we can collaborate on it? One example, I know that there was a legal hacker in Bogota who had lesson plans, and they were sharing them with someone in Odessa, Ukraine, and they were sharing the same lesson plans with folks in Imo State in Nigeria, and all hosting events and sharing the things that they're doing. And by doing that, by creating this loose, decentralized governance, or maintaining this loose, decentralized governance, you allow for these kind of amazing surprises, right? The nice serendipity to come together.
Yeah. And
so
how is that structured right now? Is that through a Facebook group, or how do you enable that serendipity to happen?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's multifaceted. The one thing that I've learned is that different regions around the world have messaging platforms that they prefer.
Yeah.
Legal Hackers started as a meetup.com platform. David Pashman, general counsel of Meetup, was a really early supporter of Legal Hackers. In fact, one of our first speakers at an event. And Meetup has been an amazing, amazing supporter of Legal Hackers. In fact, it's probably still the predominant platform for chapters to collaborate. At the same time, over time, different chapters have started Facebook groups, different chapters have started WhatsApp channels, Telegram groups, and it really all depends on where it is in the world. And that's one thing that we impress upon chapters. Do its best for the local community. Have people show up on the digital platforms where they feel most comfortable. And then as far as from chapter to chapter, we have Slack groups and WhatsApp groups and other stuff where people can get together.
And is there one massive global group where like one big swimming pool where everyone swims in, or is it also it's decentralized in that sense that really all the groups are kind of local?
We do have, if you check on the website, we have lists of our global, we have a global LinkedIn group, a global Slack, we have a global Telegram. So yeah, we enable both. And so things pop up as people become interested in things and stuff like that. Awesome.
You mentioned that you guys have like a best practice document for the chapters. Is there, what are some of the things that you feel like you've learned about how to run a chapter that really stands out to you for like what makes a good legal hackers chapter in terms of like building that community locally?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I feel really fortunate that I've been both in the role of a chapter, first as a chapter member, and then as a chapter in New York, and then a chapter organizer in Washington, D.C., and then since then helping chapters around the world get off the ground. And
you've really seen all the different stages from like member to like local coordinator now on the global scale. Yeah.
Right. And the way that I see myself at the global level is actually beneath everyone, just trying to inspire folks to do great things and help out where I can, once again, so that they can make their local communities the best that they can be. But the question of best practices is a really good one, and we're learning over time. So constantly observing what's working in different chapters, listening to chapters as they run into challenges, but also listening to chapters as they have great successes, and then trying to share those across different chapters. So I think that the following things are the most important. I'll focus on three. Number one is having a strong and diverse organizing team. Your organizing team is going to set the tone for the chapter. The diversity of the organizing team, both in terms of various perspectives, but also backgrounds, professional backgrounds, right, is going to set the tone for the whole chapter. I've heard time and time again, technologists saying, "I don't want to show up to a lawyer's event," right? Or lawyers feeling intimidated about showing up to an event. Well, is it going to be really heavy on the tech? But if the organizing team represents both sides, then you can say, no, it's both, actually. The organizers are drawing from both communities, and also adjacent communities as well. Legal hackers have been able to partner with really, really amazing groups in their local communities. So like a blockchain meetup, for example, or a Code for America brigade, or a tech policy group, internet governance groups, et cetera. Because their chapter organizers are also members of those other communities. So I think reaching out to adjacent communities is a really great way, forging those bonds and ensuring that the Legal Hackers chapters is very successful. But that comes from having diverse organizing team.
Yeah.
It also helps to distribute the workload. And so different chapters work in different ways. Sometimes someone will be responsible for one thing like social media, while someone else will be responsible for something like events. And other times everyone's responsible for everything, and they can all work together. But it's critical that you have more than one person do it. It's a lot of work to run a chapter and to run a community that's active. And so having other people you can rely on is really, really critical, and working collaboratively, with those other folks.
And we've seen that also, and I see that in my own experience also with Sandbox, for example, that I guess with volunteer organizers, sometimes someone has a lot of time available, then not that much time available. And I guess if you have more than one person, you can like that can fluctuate out a little bit, like, and it's not you're not that dependent just on one person.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So that's the first thing I'd say. It's ensuring that you have a robust and diverse organizing team.
Yep.
The second thing that's really important is having an active social media presence, and I think it's twofold. One is internally. If you have an active internal social media presence, so that means within your community, you can enable chapter members, right? The folks who feel like they share this common legal hackers open ethos, to connect with one another, to share the things that they're doing, to share their successes, or to work together on challenges. But providing a platform for members to communicate with one another internally is really critical. It also allows for organizers to post events, to share the things that are going on, etc. Write blog posts, these sorts of things. So that's internally. And then the second component of an active social media presence is external. So in Legal Hackers, we'll use Twitter to share the activities of the local chapter. Now, this enables local chapters to radiate out all of the successes of their local communities. I think one of the challenges, especially within a community like the legal innovation community, is that you have a lot of high flyers. You have really prominent academics who are doing awesome work. You have great legal technology startups. You have the incumbent legal technology companies who are doing great things. And then you have the big law firms. And these are many of them are global. And so they get a lot of press in the news, and you end up sharing a lot of the things that they're doing, their successes, their launches, their recently released papers and talks and all of this sort of stuff. And it's all terrific. I mean, the stuff that they're doing is great. But what ends up happening is it drowns out some of the more day-to-day local activities that are happening within individual chapters. Yeah. That the local startup that's just getting off the ground, the local co-working space, that's bringing together legal innovators and others within the community, right? And so by having an active I
think Jameson froze. So we were talking about kind of the social media engagement both within and outside the local chapter.
That's right. Enabling chapters to radiate out the successes and the projects and the individuals within their local community. And sharing that is helpful in two ways. First, it's helpful for the local community to share the great things that they're doing, but then it also provides an opportunity for other chapters around the world and other people within the broader legal innovation community, or the open legal innovation community, to see the things from the local chapters, to follow them on Twitter, to retweet them, and then also be inspired by them. Many of the Legal Hackers chapter organizers are incredibly inspiring legal innovators in their own right. And so by sharing these stories, you can learn about what's going on. And then my hope, and I think one of the core goals of Legal Hackers, is to facilitate the rapid dissemination of legal innovation. So making the legal system more efficient, more human-centered. So enabling the rapid dissemination of legal innovation throughout the world.
Yeah, beautiful. Was there a third point that we talked about?
Yep.
We talked about kind of the diversity of the team. We talked about using social media. Was there another thing that came to your mind about best practice of running a local hub?
Yeah, it's about events. It's about hosting in-person events, so people show up. You often ask how do people show up? One of the core things for Legal Hackers chapters is for people to show up in person. Yeah. For people to get to know one another as flesh and blood people. And to coordinate with one another, to learn from one another, to share with one another, to eat with one another, to share intimate experiences with one another. I think it's incredibly important. There's one of the things that I've seen is that there's a difference between an events company, for example, and or a conference organization, and a community.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's really important for Legal Hackers chapters is for the events to be regular enough where people feel like they're part of a community.
Mm.
And so they can show up regularly. This is something they do every month. This is something they do every other month. We recommend that chapters have between 8 to 12 free public events per year, but that could be anything from a happy hour, an after work drink or breakfast with no agenda, to a speaker, a panel of speakers. One of the things we're doing a lot more now is workshops. So teaching lawyers how to code, teaching lawyers data science or the basics of design thinking. And then on the flip side, teaching technologists about ethics or law or open source licensing or how to start a business. So creating this dialogue between the law side and the tech side. So those are the sorts of events. And then there are the larger scale events, whether it's award shows or hackathons, seminars, conferences, these sorts of things. But really, and this goes back to one of your earliest questions, what's the typical way that people engage? It's typically these smaller meetups.
Yep. And what I hear and what you were saying, like what resonated with me very much was kind of the idea of regularity, that like the difference between an event organizer, event organization, and a community is that the events happen with a certain rhythm and certain regularities. Did I hear that correctly, or that's kind of what stood out to me?
I think that's exactly right. There's a flow. It's people. It's catching up with someone once every year is very different than catching up with someone every month. You end up talking about different things because the small talk. A lot of the small talk goes to the side.
Right. You can go deeper.
Right, exactly. You have an opportunity to go deeper and deeper in different ways, through education, through prototyping and building, through deep policy discussion. But that comes through the regularity. And then it also comes back to the free and public aspect of it. When everyone's there as a volunteer and people there are first, and people show up first as legal hackers, that is, people who share the legal hackers ethos, it changes the tenor of the conversation, because people are there to meet with other people who share a common identity rather than to sell goods and services, rather than to advance some sort of policy initiative or something like that. It's people are getting together because they're people who share something in common with one another.
Yeah. Beautiful. This is a little bit more of a philosophical question, but I think it kind of connects to what we were just talking about, which is, what's your gut sense why people actually show up? What is the main driver that brings people to show up at these events and to be an active part of Legal Hackers? Is it their interest in the subject matter? Is it wanting to learn things like, you do these workshops? Is it the relationships? Is it what do you think drives people to be active parts, and like also what sustains them, I guess, over time?
It's such a great question. And I wish I could point to one thing, but I think the real answer is people show up for a variety of reasons. And from my perspective, at least, and I think I share similar sentiment with others in the legal hackers community, we want people to show up for whatever reason they want to. We want people to come because they have some desire, some passion, some interest, whether it's to learn something or whether it's to share something. I like to say that people who come to learn are actually giving as much to the community as people who come to teach, because they're providing opportunities to share knowledge and then take them back to their communities or their work or whatever it is. But people can show up as a beginner. People can show up as an expert. They can show up to talk. They can show up to build. It doesn't really matter. So long as they share this, once again, this common ethos, this common bond. If I had to pick something, though, that stands out to me, it's a global craving for something different, a new way of doing things. Open culture and open communities power a lot of the world today, whether it's the open source software communities that developed the operating systems that power many of our phones and our computers, to the open knowledge movement, and the way we get our information from things like Wikipedia, for example, to the open education movement through MOOCs, stuff like that. People within the legal profession are craving a different way of doing something. The current legal system it's old, it's ossified, and there's a lot of value in the way that the system has been constructed. It was constructed for a reason, and it does provide justice to millions of people throughout the world. But I think there are many people who crave a more open approach to the way that law is done. And so when people show up, they're showing up to learn something different. They're learning about technology to see how it can improve their legal practice, right? They're learning about free legal resources that are out there. They're learning about ways to reimagine the way that law is taught in law school. Or they're coming with technological skills and they're saying, I have these skills and I see there are problems, that there are access to justice gaps. How can I apply my skills to these problems? But at the core is this craving, I think, for something different within law and within policy.
Mm-hmm. And do I remember correctly that there's 110 local chapters like all over the world? And so most of the activity, I guess, happens locally. How important do you think it is for legal hackers the fact that, yes, the activity happens locally, but they're part of a global movement? How much do you think that matters to the local members? And how does that translate into something tangible, I guess, in their lives? Like if I live in a city and I guess I attend my local hackers mostly in that city, does it matter for me that this is part of something global? I sense yes, and I'm curious like how that shows up in your work.
Yeah, so I think it does matter. And I think it matters for a number of reasons. First and foremost, I think it matters because there are lots of people in chapters where legal innovation is a relatively new concept. Where they're still going from paper to digitization, not even on the path yet to automation. And if they can see an open global community, then they know that they're not alone in their process. They know that there are paths that have been tread. They can learn best practices from others, and then they can also connect with people around the world who are doing interesting things. And I think that's the primary. I think that's the primary value of this global community, or the reason why it matters to people that there's a global community. As the community grows, this goes back to the other thing. I think it's important because it enables rapid dissemination. The more open materials there are, the more prototypes that have been built, the more resources there are, the more worn paths there are and best practices, the easier it is to go from paper to digitization to automation, for example.
Right. And that's how that course from Colombia went to the Ukraine and Nigeria.
That's exactly right. And so I think that the first goal is just to show people that it's possible, that people are working on this and that it's important. The second one is to enable rapid dissemination. And I think the third is if we're serious about changing the way that legal culture works, the legal culture, approaching it with this original hacker ethic, the spirit of collaboration and openness, then the ultimate goal is for this open mindset, this open way of doing things, for that to be just the way things are done. And so to the extent that there are chapters all around the world, and this is what we see now, large law firms participate, members of government participate. We did a hackathon in DC with the White House, for example. If ministries of justice are getting involved and top universities are getting involved, legal technology startups are getting involved, and they're all applying the same ethic, the same ethos, then that's just the way it is. And once it's the way that it is, then I think that's when the real powerful innovation starts to happen, because people enter the legal environment, people enter the legal system with different expectations, but also the skills and the tools and the resources to make those positive changes within their local communities and then across boundaries.
Yeah, beautiful. One thing that kind of came up for me was also the question, like, how is it to, you guys are growing pretty fast from what I understood, like you're already at 110 now. How is that growth happening? What are the challenges that come with that growth, and how are you guys like dealing with those challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that there are a few aspects to it that I can mention, or that I will mention. Happy to share anything. But the first one is that as you grow, there are obviously management challenges. You know, when you have 10 chapters, it's easy to send a group email, "Hey, what's going on in your 10 chapters?" When you have 110 chapters, spreading information or enabling coordination between chapters, or sharing information from, you know, Legal Hackers LLC, becomes more of a data management or CRM issue.
Yeah, because like you must have hundreds of organizers now across the world, right?
That's right. So let's say there's an average of 3 organizers per chapter, and then 110 chapters, and then 40 additional chapters that are still in formation.
40 additional chapters are in formation right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And so that requires a lot of data management, and so I think that's one of the things that we're working really hard on, to make sure that we can serve as a facilitator, or continue to serve as a facilitator for the chapters as they grow, and then across chapters if they need connections to one another, et cetera. So I think that's one of the challenges. I think the other challenge that's really important is something that we talked about before, which is ensuring some consistency while also enabling experimentation and localization. So localism, as I mentioned, is totally critical to who we are. Experimentation is totally critical. So one example is legal hackathons. Legal Hackers hosted the first legal hackathon, and Legal Hackers chapters have hosted some of the first legal hackathons in their cities or their countries all around the world. It's gotten to a point now where legal hackathons have become something that can be more commercial. So law firms will host legal hackathons, companies will host legal hackathons, organizations get set up, or companies get set up for the sole purpose of hosting legal hackathons. Yeah, wow. Where they'll charge money for it. It'll be like a big competitive to do, right? Where it's over the course of 2 days, you get thousands of dollars in prizes, lots of rah-rah, lights and sound, you know, that sort of stuff. At that point, at least from my perspective, it's time to move on to the next type of event.
You kind of achieved what you wanted to achieve in that
right. Sense. Yeah, that's the first thing. Applying the hackathon process in the legal profession is now something that's not only widely recognized, but also seen as a standard operating procedure. You know, for many, when they want to do a big event, they say, well, why don't we do a hackathon? So for us, the question is, or for legal hackers, the question is, you know, how do you flip that? How do you flip that on its head? What's the new way of doing events, of enabling people to get together? So hosting coding for lawyers workshops, you know, for example, or design sprints, are new ways of getting people together, that I think are really important, but also a way of kind of consistently experimenting, right? Which is the point there. So how do we ensure consistency while also enabling this sort of experimentation? And that comes down to mission statement and values and expectations about what Legal Hackers is.
And so are these written down at the moment, or are they like, are these like, if I'm a chapter leader in Switzerland, I want to start a chapter, you going to provide me that information mostly through a written document, or mostly through conversations I'm going to have with you? How is that being transmitted?
Yeah, so I think that there are two aspects to it. One is stuff that's written. So if you go on our website, you see that on it's called Our Story. You can see the history of legal hackers. You can see what legal hacking is, so creative problem solving at the intersection of law and technology. You can see what we do, but you can also see who we aren't. So what makes us different, and why is that important to us? So this idea of incorporating the hacker ethic in the legal profession. super critical to who we are, but also being non-commercial, not a trade association, not an advocacy group, and kind of setting those foundational elements.
Mm.
And when a chapter forms, if you go look at the new chapter request, there's a description there, and then there are a number of commitments that a new chapter makes. If you make a new chapter, you commit to the following things. And then in terms of maintaining that over time, it's just about looking out for one another, making sure that we're doing our best, because it is a challenge running a volunteer organization. It is a challenge relying on in-kind sponsors to host events, forging these relationships, maintaining community. So it's important for us to look out for one another to make sure that we're able to move forward our mission in keeping with these core values. So that's a little bit more on the implicit side. And then there's the storytelling. People say, well, what's an example where something went wrong, and how did you deal with it, right? In your chapter. And so we've been collecting these stories over time. Or what's an example of co-optation of the organization, and how did you deal with it? Yeah, so that's how it's done, explicitly and then also implicitly.
Yeah, beautiful. And is your sense, you're at 110, going to 150, is your sense, is it possible to scale up that to many more hundreds and, thousands of chapters, being a totally volunteer-driven organization? Or at some point, is there a ceiling to how far you can go, kind of being purely volunteer-driven? Or does at some point you just need to hire someone who's helps manage that? Do you have a gut sense? That's a very vague question, and how can you know where the future? But what's your gut sense around that?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and it's one that we at Legal Hackers, both the board of directors, local chapters across the world, and of course in conversations with others, we have to address. My sense is that we can remain a volunteer organization, and that we can manage it. Technology is great. It's very powerful these days, and enables folks to do a lot of things that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do. So I think that by using sound data management, project management, and software solutions in order to manage the community, both within local communities, across communities at a national, regional, and global level, that we can continue to remain volunteer. It's my view that by changing the structure from one that's volunteer-based, and that's the local chapter, but then also the global organization, by changing the structure by one that's volunteer-based to one where someone is paid to or has a monetary incentive for legal hackers, or to run Legal Hackers, that there's a risk that it would change the constitution of the organization, what it means, what drives people to participate. It also, I think, by restricting the organization, the resources of the organization, it prevents a lot of the mission creep that happens in other organizations that get flush with cash, foundations and others that end up, oh, we'll do this initiative and we'll start an accelerator and an incubator and do all the, now that we have this money, or you collect foundation money, a lot of foundation money, for example, and they say, where's the ROI? What are you building, and all these sort of stuff. I think Legal Hackers, because we exist at the lowest level of the legal innovation stack, because it's about who people are and their identity, that we can serve as kind of the free, open foundation. And then people can go off and do whatever they want based off of their experiences at Legal Hackers, while Legal Hackers itself remains free and open to all.
Beautiful. Maybe as we kind of close here, what about your job do you love the most? What about you being kind of able to run Legal Hackers? What gives you the most energy? What do you love the most about it?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And two things that are really great about it is, first, it's not my job. This is my volunteer. This is my volunteer thing. So it's really great to contribute my time, stories that I've heard, to others who are starting their chapters, to help inspire folks around the world, to help them raise up the voices from their local communities, so that we can all, like I said, rapidly disseminate legal innovation. I really love that, and love that it's something that I'm able to do on a volunteer basis. The second thing is, what's great about it is, while I spend a lot of time in working on the board of Legal Hackers, I don't run it. It's the local chapters that run it. It's everyone around the world all working together and sharing their experiences with one another and doing great things in their local communities. We do espouse these decentralized values, and we practice them. So it's terrific to be able to see folks around the world say, I believe in this, and then work to make it a reality and make it a success in their local communities. So that's really amazing too. And then I think the final thing, what brings me the most joy, is just hearing the stories, hearing about people in their local community saying, you know, when we first started the chapter, we didn't know if people were gonna congeal around this idea or get involved in something that had the name hacker in it, right at the basics. And then we explained to them about open culture. We explained to them about the hacker ethic, right, that Stephen Levy talked about in his book Hackers, but the Wikipedia article talks about it too. And then now people are coming around and they're saying, hey, I think I'm a legal hacker too, and how can I get involved, and how can I contribute to this community? How can I show up? And hearing those stories around the world, from Austria to Zimbabwe, is really inspiring. And so I just have fun. Every conversation is a lot of fun. Meeting people from around the world is a lot of fun. And yeah, so I look forward to it continuing to grow.
Awesome. Beautiful. Well, thanks for taking time, Jameson. So I so appreciate you like sharing this, and I'll stop the recording here.